Great, Colleen. Hey, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Thank you so much for a beautiful concert. That was so stunning.
Well, it was half you, if not more. So,
It wasn't more than half me, but it was just so delightful to be able to make such a beautiful evening's worth of music with you. So thank you for just singing so beautifully and being such a good colleague. So if you happen to be watching this live, please feel free to put any comments or questions in the chat, and we will try um, to get to those and answer them. But Colleen, I wonder if you might just uh, talk a little bit about what this program was like for you to kind of assemble and maybe the joys or the challenges of it.
sure. I mean, I always like good backstage gossip. So, of course, like many other colleagues during COVID, there are so few opportunities to actually collaborate and make art. So, to be able to make art in person, and
Yeah.
especially with you, I jumped at the opportunity when you mentioned it. I think the idea came about because we had done one of the songs from the Bible songs for the Christmas
Hmm.
program at Emmanuel, and we both thought, wow, this is really great music, and it never really gets done, especially by someone who's not a male soprano and 10. So it was exciting to sort of investigate that rep. Um, I remember sort of being really excited about getting it in the mail and then sort of discovering that we had it in different keys and what did that mean and which
Hmm.
key were we doing it in,
Yeah.
and trying to find some repertoire that would complement it well. So it's not every day that I get to do a recital with organ in particular, even though I work at a church and we do a lot of music, especially an organist of your caliber and an instrument of that caliber and in that space. It was really exciting for me to be able to put all that together. But I can't take credit for the brainchild of the program because that was truly you. So you
Wow.
should probably answer some of that question.
Well, I mean, I thought that as Colleen mentioned, like we were exploring the one song that we did together back at around Christmas time, and we both commented to each other that like in searching for like a recording to just listen to of that song, like there weren't any good recordings on YouTube for the version of the piece with a solo singer, which is how the set was originally intended, even though today, within the kind of the rhythm of English cathedral music, these songs tend to be sung by a choir of trebles. Um, so we could find lots of recordings of choirs of trebles singing this music, but it was actually hard to find any decent recordings of a solo voice, and particularly a soprano, singing this repertoire. And so we were like, well, maybe it should be us. So here we are on the back end of this. And it's been fun to really explore that repertoire because I play a lot of Stanford in my kind of career. And he wrote so much choral church music that it's like very interesting to see a different side of it. And frankly, like the accompaniments were harder than I expected them to be.
So were the vocal lines. I think we both had a moment during that recording session where we were like, we really underestimated this. This is hard.
It was a little bit harder than I was
It's
anticipating.
your
Yeah.
challenge is great. So thank you.
And to pair them with the three familiar French pieces, I think was just really, really lovely. And you sing like the Gounod, the Rompetier, just like so beautifully. So thank you for that. Now, full disclosure, Colleen and I went to high school together, so we've known each other for a long time, out in Frederick, Maryland. So I wonder, Colleen, if you might just talk a little bit about kind of your influences growing up in that community, and what kind of enticed you to stay in kind of Maryland in the DC area for your career.
Sure. Well, I don't know if you had a similar experience, but when we were both in an advanced music studies program, which was basically a magnet program for high school musicians. But we were on block scheduling, which meant we only had 4 classes a day in high school. And this program took 2 of those classes every day for the entire year. Mm-hmm. So you're really committing half of your schedule to that program. And to make that decision about whether or not that would be worthwhile at age 16 or 17, for me, it only made sense to sort of dedicate all of that time if I knew that this was something that I wanted to pursue professionally and go on and major in it in college. So I was making that decision, like in a Boston Market parking lot or something like that in high school, about the fact that I wanted to be a professional opera singer without really knowing what that meant. I grew up with parents who certainly appreciated music, not really classical music. I grew up with Michael Jackson and the Bee Gees and, all of that sort of era of music. But to then go to this advanced music studies program where we were able to study music theory and music history and take ensemble classes within our instrument. I think we did like a really embarrassing production of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat.
I remember that.
And then to be able to pursue singing after that, there was an elder statesman, an elder classman that went on to DePaul University, and I really admired his singing. And so I checked out DePaul in Chicago and decided that that's where I wanted to go. And they luckily accepted me. And so I received a bachelor's of music in vocal performance from DePaul, and sort of happened into the Maryland Opera Studio grad program back here in College Park, where I met a guy. And then I did my postgraduate studies at the Academy of Vocal Arts, but that guy sort of brought me back to Maryland. So we've made our lives here, and it's been really wonderful because it's a really rich community here. I think, you went away to Boston and all these other places. I think we actually reconnected for one of the first times in DC at the American Guild of Organists convention.
That's right. Yes.
I happened to be singing and you were there, and we had Mexican food. So it was really wonderful to be in a city that has so much, in an area that has so much to offer. One of my first professional operas was actually at Emmanuel Church with opera. Yeah. I sang Alcina there in the upstairs room.
In the great hall upstairs, yeah.
Yes. Yes. And so I was really excited to come back and be able to make music in that space again, because I had a lot of really fun memories of being able to perform music in such a beautiful area. So
wonderful.
Question? I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. You answered the question. Yeah. Colleen and I in high school, like 8 o'clock or whatever time it was way too early for me. But
I don't think you had to show up at 8 if you brought the teacher coffee and donuts. I feel
like that is actually very true. That is not an exaggeration at all. That if you walked in with coffee or food, you were excused from being late. Yes, that is.
There was one day that I think I showed up on time, and he handed me a 20 and said, "I haven't seen you yet." I got him a coffee.
Go get coffee. Yeah.
Times have changed. You can't do that now.
I don't think so. But yeah. So you mentioned your husband and your family, and I wonder what it's like kind of being a working opera singer specifically, but also a working musician, and juggling kind of the demands of motherhood and parenthood in the case of both of you. He's also a musician, yeah.
Yes, he's a musician and an educator and a church musician. When you're a musician, you have like 7 jobs. And that's, I think, part of the intricacy and the complication of it all is that, I think there's a quote that I'm going to butcher, but somebody smart said that, being able to do something like juggling motherhood and jobs and your careers and your passion, it's like realizing that all of the balls that you have in the air, some of them are glass and some of them are plastic. You're gonna drop one at some point in time, but just try to make sure that you're dropping the one that's gonna bounce. as opposed to the one that's going to break. And I think it sort of changes from day to day, which one is plastic and which one is glass. It's been amazing to be married to a musician, especially a musician that has a steady paycheck and health insurance and a pension. So because he understands what I do and he appreciates what I do and he supports what I do, but he can also provide the sort of safety and security so that I can sort of fly away on a gig and come back. And when I'm home with my kids, I'm home with my kids, which is great. When I'm away, and we find other ways to connect. FaceTime is a godsend. I don't know how people did it before FaceTime. And my kids are able to be exposed to lots of different things that have to do with music and arts and culture. So that's a trade-off, and I'm really excited for it. But just being a working mom, I think that the classical music industry is starting to really embrace that, like a lot of other arts organizations are, because it's not a lifestyle that is historically very conducive to people with lives.
Absolutely.
Their art. So, I remember I'm currently pregnant with my third child. And so we saw a little bit of the bump in the video, but with my first child, it was a big secret. You couldn't tell anybody because you might get fired. And with my second child, I worked all the way up until, the day before he was born, and then made a major debut when he was 3 weeks old. So times are really changing, and that's been really exciting to see and be a part of.
Absolutely. How do you juggle, maybe that's not the right word, but is there a difference of approach if you're singing an opera role versus like a concert performance of an oratorio and doing the solos in Handel or something? Maybe not Handel, but who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's more. This is going to sound terrible, and I don't mean it that way. There's more preparation in an opera because it's generally longer.
Yeah.
And it's off book always. And it's usually adapted from source material that you also have to be intimately familiar with, because when it was written, it was a given that the audience would be intimately associated with that source material. So you're usually reading novels and books and poems and trying to figure out, well, how are these characters as multifaceted as they can be, so that you're preparing not just the music, but the language and sort of the dramatic intention. And certainly concerts have dramatic intention and things like that, but depending on the language and depending on the length of the concert, and depending on sort of the multifacetedness, there's source material like, I don't know, Romantic French, and then there's source material like the Bible, which we might be more familiar with. So it sort of cuts out some of the process, which is nice. I love concerts though. I mean, I think that they're, from a purely practical standpoint, it's much easier on family life and traveling because the time frame is shorter. And some of the best music that I've ever done has been concerts. Verdi Requiem, for example. I think it's better than almost any of his operas that he's written. But and collaboration between orchestra and conductor and the fellow soloists. It's short and it's sweet, but it's really lovely. And there's an intimacy that you have to drop into as soon as you get there, which means if you don't know your music, you're in trouble because there's no way to fix it. There's a bit more panic involved with concerts, but ultimately the end result is far outweighs the panic.
Absolutely. Speaking of opera roles, I wonder if you have a favorite. Like, is that a horrible question to ask, or like, what's your favorite role?
No, I mean, it's a complicated question to ask, because the correct answer is that my favorite opera role is whatever you've hired me to sing. But in terms of roles that I've done in the past, I love Violetta in La Traviata. I love Susanna in Carlisle Floyd's adaptation of the biblical story, Susanna and the Elders. And I would love to sing Tatiana in Eugene Onegin and Rusalka in Rusalka and Desdemona in Otello. Love all of those operas. And Mozart. I mean, Mozart is like perfect, always.
So there's more to check off the list once everything gets back to normal, right?
Yes, please.
Please. I wondered, for those who don't know, like, what if you could just talk a little bit about, you referenced before the amount of preparation time that goes into staging an opera. Like, for those who don't know, can you just talk a little bit about that? Because it's not like you just show up the week of and you start performing, right?
No, most opera gigs are about, I think the shortest one I've ever done is like 2.5 weeks. Most of them usually run 3 to 4 weeks of just rehearsals. And that is assuming that you are showing up already memorized. So all of the prep that you do musically happens before that month. And then when you're there, that month is dedicated to putting it together on the stage with your colleagues and the orchestra. And then you usually get, I mean, if you're really lucky and you're someplace like Chicago Lyric or the Met, you might get 10 performances. But generally speaking, it's, you know, sometimes only 2 performances or 3 performances or, you know, maybe 5, something like that. So it's a long rehearsal period for usually a condensed amount of performances. But that process, I think, is really exciting because you get to sort of collaborate every day with other artists and have those intellectual conversations about art and humanity and emotions and people. And that's what I really love to do within the music career that we share. So it's really exciting.
Yeah, and as Colleen mentioned, like the performance part, like for 10 performances at the Met, that's a commitment of another month at least.
Of course.
So like you're looking at an 8-week time away from your family to do this, which is one of the things that makes it so hard to juggle all of this, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So you can perform locally.
So if you can perform locally, it's great. Absolutely. So at home, I just wonder if there are any songs that your kids particularly like to hear you sing, or maybe any songs that they don't want to hear you practicing at home.
Absolutely. I was working on a solo recital when my eldest Christian, he's not named after you, but
I didn't expect so, no.
But maybe a little bit. But he was very young when I was working on a solo recital, and my encore piece for the solo recital was a solo rendition of Eric Whitacre's Goodnight Moon, which is the children's book. And so he and I had been reading it together, and then I just started singing it to him, sort of shrewdly to be able to help myself memorize it for the recital. But then it sort of became our little tradition. And now, you know, whenever I sing it, it's a song that he'll ask for at bedtime. And so it became our sort of bedtime routine, which is really sweet. And he asked me to come in to his preschool. So it was really, really fun to be able to do that. Caleb, my second son, doesn't want me to sing. When I warm up in the car, he's like, "It's too loud. Please don't do that." They love to sing, and it sort of depends on the day what they like to sing. They'll scream show tunes at the top of their mouths. They love Michael Jackson. The other day, Christian requested that I put on the Hallelujah chorus so that he could sing as many of the parts as he could. He likes to sing along to the Vivaldi Spring movement. So it's really fun to see whatever it is that they're excited about in the moment. And it could be Wheels on the Bus or Christmas Tree or Thriller. It just depends.
Well, fantastic. Well, Colleen, it's been such a delight to be able to chat with you a little bit this evening. I know you're wearing some special earrings. Do you want to say anything about those quickly?
Sure. Well, somebody else that we went to high school with has her own business making jewelry in Charleston, South Carolina, which is really awesome because she uses elements of the beaches nearby and fuses them into the glass that she makes. and turns them into jewelry, and then donates part of her proceeds to go back to saving those beaches and saving the environment, which is really, really cool. So if you get a chance, check out elucookdesigns.com, because she has beautiful, beautiful pieces.
Well, Colleen, it's been so good to reconnect with you. And I remember fondly all those early mornings back in high school, and particularly the productions that we did together back then. And it's so nice to be able to reconnect and to do such a beautiful program. So thank you for singing so wonderfully. And yeah, we hope to see you soon.
This has been so amazing. I really, really appreciate it. And we should meet for like an afternoon donut and coffee now that we're adults and kids.
There we go. Sounds good. Okay. Have a great night.
You too. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.